back to another episode of the podcast, Come Over for Dinner. I am so glad you're joining me today. Today I have a very special guest. Her name is Michele Dickinson. She currently works full-time as a nurse practitioner at a cancer center down in Lewiston, Idaho. One interesting thing about her, I met her recently, but I worked for her husband over 20 years ago when he had a law firm here. He's now in the computer world and is no longer I guess he was a public defender.
Public defender.
For the city of Moscow, and he was a good one. So that was very interesting, that history, to reconnect with both of them. So welcome, Michele.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm really excited to hear about her take on hospitality. She has lived all over the world. So, Michele, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. So I am from Colorado, and I grew up on a small farm in Colorado. I have 6 siblings, so there were 7 of us. So I had lots of different animals and garden and all those kinds of things. And my mom was a very hospitable person, so I learned hospitality organically. You learn things that you don't even know you're learning. So I'm very grateful for that. That was the first third of my life. The next third, I went to nursing school and then spent time overseas in 3 different countries, in the Middle East, in the United Arab Emirates, and then in Nepal, and then in Cambodia. So not continuously, but back and forth. So that was the next third of my life. And then the most recent third of my life, I've been in Moscow, Idaho, married to my husband, Greg, and my husband has 4 sons. So I married into 4 stepsons. They are all here. The 3 older ones are all married and have children and live here. So it's been a wild ride, actually. My life has been a wild ride.
So how many grandkids now?
So as of Friday, there are 14.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
How special.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about being overseas. When I think about hospitality over there, it's definitely going to be different customs, and the way people do things and the foods they eat, the spices they use will be different. But you mentioned something to me earlier about how interesting it is that we still all center around food.
Yeah, and I know many people have heard that, and it really is a universal truth that hospitality in every culture I've had a chance, where I've lived and where I've had a chance to visit, it's always focused on, there's food is always a part of it. Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of times ceremony with presentation and those kinds of things. So lots of things that you don't necessarily realize that we do, where there is ceremony. We might not call it that, but you reflect on this after you've been elsewhere and think, yeah, that we have our own ways of doing things and things that just they're cultural, and that this whole thing of food, or if people don't have food, I've lived in places where people were very, very poor, in Nepal in particular, then it was not necessarily food because they didn't always actually have food to give you, but it would be tea. So serving tea and little store-bought biscuits, that was all, a very poor family would have to offer, but that's always part of it.
But they still had something, even though it was meager, they still had something that they wanted to share with you, and it was some sort of food.
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, and you do think about all the ways we celebrate birthdays, weddings, anniversaries. What you talk about is the food.
Yeah.
Where you went to eat, or what you cooked, or
yes,
what your menu is going to be.
And that each culture too will have special food for special holidays. That's very universal. So that's interesting. And that, at a particular time of year, they get excited about just the things that they cook that time of year. And then they get very excited about sharing it with you, which we feel that way as well.
Similar to Thanksgiving coming up.
Christmas, right? Just whatever our traditions are, that is really very universal. So,
were there any particular holidays or times that stood out to you while you were over there that you can remember?
So that's interesting because I lived in a Muslim country, and then in a Hindu country, and then in a Buddhist country. So they celebrate different holidays, and they're at different times of year. And what was always interesting is Christians in those countries trying to claim those things and make them Christian. So watching new believers do that and take the things that were, part of the Hindu celebration in Nepal, for example, but making them Christian was always fascinating to watch that, and watch that happen from the believers, them understanding that was as Christians what they wanted to do. So holding on to some of the things, but making them Christian. So, yeah.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
Were there things that you saw that they needed to change?
Yeah, that's interesting. I would go to Nepal again, probably for the best example of that, where in Nepalese culture, which is Hindu, the lower caste people cannot cook food for higher caste people. So when there would be church gatherings, they would always have the highest caste Christians. Mm-hmm. These are because the caste is actually attached to their birth. And so they would always have high caste Christians cook the rice so that everyone would eat it. So even in the Christian context, they would not ask a low caste Christian to cook the rice because the higher caste people would not eat it.
That is interesting, because I would imagine that it would be the opposite, because usually you think of the lower caste as being more of the servants and expected to do that sort of thing. But I guess in this culture, they were looked down upon as being clean, maybe?
It's a matter of unclean. So, it harkens to what we read in the Old Testament about clean and unclean. That's what it's about. And so those are things where I'm sure that the longer there are Christians, the more time their culture has to be redeemed, that those are things that will change. But that was always a little bit shocking to me, actually, because I remember asking kind of so this is a higher caste Christian, but someone that had become a Christian just a couple of years before I got there. And I said, oh, you wouldn't eat the rice, if this person cooked it. This is a person in the fellowship. And she said, oh no, we can't. So yeah, so that's it was shocking to me. And then I just realized, no, I mean, this is what Christ has come to do, is to redeem all of this, right? And that in time, these Christians will realize, oh, it doesn't matter who cooks the food.
They have to know their Bible. It is so interesting how cultures do change once Christianity permeates that culture. That reminds me of one of the stories Lisa Leidenfrost told about the men would eat separate from their families. And there were new Christians, who the men just realized, I'm going to eat with my family for the first time. They would eat at the table with their wife and children, but it was just so anti what the normal culture was. So that is very interesting. Were there any particular foods that you remember eating?
Oh, so much good
I'm sure you were
food,
introduced for 18 years. If you lived there, you were introduced to all kinds of things.
Yeah. And it's, it is a lot of the things that you would think of, like in Nepal, it would be like Indian food, those kinds of spices and those kinds of foods. The food in the Middle East was honestly pretty boring. It was, kind of a goat or piece of meat in the middle of some vegetables. Not very interesting, not spicy.
Not like the loads of spices that India uses.
That's right. Yeah. And then Cambodia, more, East Asian, more like Thai food and that kind of thing. So that food was really good. Yeah. So fun, always getting to be in a different place and eat different foods and be exposed to all of that.
Did it influence how you cook now? Because that was I guess you went over at 18, 19?
Well, I didn't go really till I was more like 25.
That's true. You
kind
went
of
to
nursing school and then
first.
experience. Yeah. So more like kind of mid-20s to mid-30s was when I was over there. For sure it did. I mean, I like foods that I don't think I would have otherwise liked, and certainly feel comfortable cooking things that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise. I don't know. Yeah.
Did you ever go to someone's home and they teach you local things? Like, did any ladies say, hey, I'll teach you how to make, I don't know, whatever the local thing was to make?
Yes, for sure. I mean, they love that. They love, well, because if you show interest in their food and what they're doing, then they just want to give you more, give you more of that and give you more instruction and knowledge.
Yes. So, and the saying, imitation is the best form of flattery. That is such a compliment to say, can you teach me how to do that? I would love to know how to make your whatever. Your famous curry, or
that's right. Yeah.
Whatever their famous dish was.
Yeah. So it's fun.
That is so interesting. Have you visited since you've moved back here?
No, I haven't. So I haven't visited any of the places where I lived. So they remain in my mind a certain way. And I know that they're not that way anymore because it's been a long time since I was there. But
that's true.
It's still very dear to me.
Times do change countries. Any particular stories that stand out from working as a nurse?
Oh, so many stories. It is hard to come up with like a story just because there's just so many things. Nursing gives so many opportunities to minister to people in ways that are very intimate, right from the moment of contact. So I was always grateful for that opportunity to really to share the gospel that way as an entrance into whatever their next thing was. And so I would say that would probably be a whole nother show.
Talking
yes. About all of the, the medical things. Actually, that wouldn't be great for a hospitality about dinner. lots of not so nice things.
That is true. But as we mentioned earlier, in every culture, for every person, we all have to eat. That kind of ministry really does meet people's needs, physical needs, which opens the door for conversation, getting to know people, telling them about Christ, maybe just deepening friendships and offering the Christian encouragement we're supposed to towards each other if those people already are Christians. So just food, centering a visit around food really is an amazing way to greet whoever comes into your home.
Yeah.
Or just tea and cookies. Tea and biscuits.
Tea and biscuits
also
if
works.
That's what it needs to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So tell me what a favorite menu would be that you would serve if you were inviting guests into your home.
Okay. So the meal that I wanted to talk about is a meal that part of the reason I love this meal is because it works for people who are vegetarian, who are gluten-free, who are dairy-free. So I was trying to think of something that has broad appeal that way. And it's always a winner. So everyone that eats this meal likes it. So
you can tell she's a nurse. She is thinking about all the people.
All the things. And over
to minister to all the people.
Yeah, you get the different things and it's oh no, I invited someone and this has, all the things that they can't eat,
right.
And usually people are very gracious about that, but it's but it's nice to have something that it's just kind of an easy go-to that way. So it's a recipe that is, and I said it's vegetarian, but there is meat with it as well. But it's one of those that you can eat the meat or not eat the meat. So it's chipotle pork with refried beans, cilantro rice, and a cabbage salad. That's the basic. And then, you can add the things that you want to add to it, which could be sour cream, it could be guacamole or avocado or cheese, those kinds of things, but those are all add-ons. And I always serve it with both flour tortillas and corn tortillas. So then there's the corn thing, the flour thing, and then just tortilla chips. And it feeds a crowd. So I actually realized when I was looking at my recipes, it's I don't know how many this serves. Because, I always just make it in this massive quantity to feed a lot of people. So, yeah.
This reminds me of Chipotle, where you just can set out a whole bar of different things and they build their own bowl or they build their own burrito.
Taco. Yeah, exactly.
Some people call them burrito bowls. This is actually an amazing idea for a crowd. And like you're saying, really you just think of a large quantity of each thing and it serves so many. Yeah. And if you have leftovers, that's great too. You could freeze the meat.
The leftovers are the best, They
really
send
are.
Send them home with somebody, that needs an extra meal. Yeah.
Have some extra boxes there where they can build a salad for the next day or wrap a burrito for the next day.
Yep.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Are there any shortcuts that you use when you make this?
So I recently learned, I hadn't done this until recently, but actually cooking rice in the oven. I do have a rice cooker, but it's an oven cooked cilantro lime rice. It is one of those things that you can do that ahead of time and then you can just warm it up in the rice cooker. Sometimes it's just, all the timing of everything. You could actually warm it up again in the oven too. So that's something that I didn't know if I would like it, but it's worked really well. So
have you cooked it the night before and then rewarmed it in the oven, or do you cook it day of so it doesn't dry out?
I haven't tried to do it the night before, but I think that you could. I think you would probably just add a little bit more liquid to warm it up. That's what I would do. So I guess I should a little bit of disclaimer on that if it didn't
work.
Right,
we have to experiment to know for sure. But still, an oven method would be very fast and hands off.
And then just sometimes not, because I have a relatively small kitchen. And so just even my rice cooker on the counter, it doesn't take up a lot of space, but it's sort of one more thing that's out,
valuable
right?
counter space.
It's kind of valuable counter space, yeah. So just not having that out and having that, so getting the rice done.
Well, and
sooner.
then if you have one of those foil pans, you can just pull
away.
that out, set it on your bar ready to serve, and then throw it away when you're done.
Throw it away at the end, yeah.
You don't have to clean a pot.
Yeah, yeah, and then the pot's already, pot's cleaned, yeah. So that would probably be that tip. I tend to do this meal I put the meat in my crock pot or my slow cooker, and it just kind of goes all day. And then I do my beans in my pressure cooker. And my pressure cooker is, I don't have an Instapot, but I think it's just like an Instapot. It's an electric. It's not on the stovetop. So I think that's what an Instapot is.
It's just probably a different brand. I think lots of brands have come out with that.
Yeah.
Pressure cookers, of course, have been around forever, but then Instapot really made it popular again.
Yeah.
So many people started realizing how much time it could cut. So now there's lots of different brands, Ninja and I don't know.
All these things. My mom always cooked with a pressure cooker. So I didn't actually realize how afraid people were of pressure cookers because we always had one. And then I was like, oh yeah, people are very afraid of pressure cookers.
Maybe because in the past there were fails. Maybe people didn't know how to handle the steam safely.
Probably.
But then there may have been some old ones that, I don't know, maybe a disaster happened where the lid exploded or something. I have no idea.
I'm sure it did happen. So.
Maybe there was some horror story passed down through the ages and now they fixed that problem.
Yeah.
I mean, you still do have to be careful, but you know.
Yeah. Yeah, so
you can learn it pretty easily. It's the same thing as don't burn yourself when you're opening the oven. You know, you just don't put your arm over the steam when you're releasing the steam.
All the things.
Yeah. Well, this sounds delicious. What about, so you've mentioned really all the things you serve with the meat, beans, rice.
And then a cabbage salad.
The cabbage salad, and sour cream, cheese, and what else do you probably mentioned it earlier. But
I do also make salsa. And another disclosure, I can't share the recipe because it was someone's family recipe.
It's in the vault.
Like they literally told me, you cannot share this recipe.
It's top secret. That's okay.
It's really good, but I think a lot of people have a salsa recipe.
Chunky or thin?
It's pretty thin.
Well, you know what I'll share? I'll post. Pioneer Woman has a delicious salsa. You can't have somebody allergic to cilantro, but that's really the only disclaimer there. But I'll post that one because I make it all the time because you can blend it in your blender.
That's how I make this one.
Everything into a blender. Yeah. I have a Vitamix. You really could do anything and just whirl it for a few seconds and you are done. I will say that if you let it sit in the fridge for a little while, the flavors meld a lot better than if you just do it and serve it. I like it sitting there for a bit. Maybe even overnight, which is another prep tip. Do it a day ahead but I can post that one.
Okay, perfect. And that sounds similar to the one that I use. It's an easy appetizer. That's an easy thing. People walk into the house and you have your chips and salsa out and then you can just have more with the meal. So that is kind of another step that you don't have to think about if you were wanting to do an appetizer. So.
And you mentioned guacamole. And cheese, you always use shredded cheese or some kind of liquid cheese?
Usually shredded. Just get some shredded cheese or shred it. I don't mind shredding it.
And then corn, do you ever put corn on top?
I don't, but that's a good idea.
Well, I am thinking through the Chipotle bar.
Yeah, exactly. The Chipotle corn salsa. Oh, that would be really good.
They have some kind of something that is corn related. I can't remember all the other things, but all of this sounds so delicious. So when you're making guacamole, or if you just cut up avocados to serve with this meal, I often, when I go to the store, the avocados are green and I often can't use them. So what is a tip? I mean, if you think ahead of time, that's great, but how do you get them to go a little bit faster? Do you have a tip for how you can make them ripen faster?
Yeah. So if you put them in a paper bag with a banana and then put them in a warm-ish spot, and that really will ripen them faster. And so if you've got a day or two, I mean, they won't ripen in a single day, but if you have even a 2 or 3 day lead time when they otherwise wouldn't ripen, I've had that work before.
That is a great tip. Can you also do that with other fruits or vegetables?
I have heard that. I haven't done it with anything else, but I have done it with avocados. And I actually did a test one time where I left one out and I did put one in with, just to see if in my kitchen, in my real life, did it actually work? So I put one in the bag with the banana, one I left out, and the one in the bag definitely ripened. I mean, it was 2 or 3 days ahead of where the other one did. So if you're shopping midweek for the weekend or something, it would actually help you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good to know because a lot of times people are shopping a little bit ahead, but maybe it's not enough days to have their avocados ready.
In the north, right, where like avocados are not ready, they are, and they'll be hard for a week or 10 days sometimes.
I have noticed things up here ripening much slower, which can be nice, and other times it's really not.
It's not nice.
So what is your warm spot? Where do you put them?
in the winter, once we actually have the heat in the house on, we have forced air. So, I'll just put it near a forced air vent. So not directly over it, but near it, like in a basket or something. And because it is warmer in that part of the house.
Good to know. Very good to know. What about a dessert?
I have this plum tree and I get lots of plums off this tree. And kind of the amazing thing about plums here is that they never have any bugs in them. They're like this perfect fruit. So I a lot of times will make a plum because I fill my freezer with all these plums in the fall. And then it's like, it gets to be like, oh, I got to use those. So that's just a basic plum kind of crisp is like, that's pretty easy. You can do a plum crisp ahead of time, just dump the fruit in the 9x13, make your streusel topping. So that's one. I also like to make pan cookies. I have a good recipe just for called a Congo bar. So I just think that's easier and faster than dropping cookies.
So you end up putting it kind of flat in a pan and cutting it almost like brownies, but they're called pan cookies.
Yeah.
Oh, we definitely have to get this recipe.
Okay.
Sounds delicious.
Okay. Yeah. Really good.
How do you prep your plums to put them in the freezer?
This is the beauty of these plums. You just cut them in half and you pull the pit out and they just go in a Ziploc bag. They are the easiest fruit I've ever worked with. The plum just falls out. The pit just falls out of the plum.
And then when you go to put it in your crisp, then what? You just put the halves in there?
Yeah, because by the time that they've frozen, there's some juice in there. So you just open the bag and just dump it in. It's really, really easy.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah, and really quick.
Can you do that with plums from the store, do you think?
I imagine. I don't see these kinds of plums. I think that these are called an Italian prune. They grow a lot around here. So for people that live locally, they're everywhere. There's these trees and some people don't like them. So you'll always see these posts in the fall. I have this plum tree that's giving all these plums. We don't eat them. Come pick them.
Really?
So, yeah.
Hot tip for the locals.
Yeah, hot tip for the locals.
I'll have to look for those posts. Yeah. Because I'm not sure I've had any.
I'll bring you some.
Okay. Can make a plum crisp.
Yeah.
I can make the plum crisp that we will post a recipe
There you go.
Sounds amazing. How do you prep to have guests over?
So Wednesdays, we do family dinner. So I do not actually have to go to the clinic on Wednesdays. So that's my technically day off. And so we do family dinner on Wednesdays and everybody that's here is invited. That's usually between around 15 adults. And then now there's more than 14 kids because our nephew and his wife also live in town and they come to family dinner. So I think we're up to 17 kids now or something like that. So that's Wednesday nights. So that's probably like the main thing I'm doing like on a regular basis. In the summertime, we can invite other people to be part of that because we can be outside and we have a little bit more room. It's a little bit harder in the winter months or in the colder months just because limited by space. But one thing I like to do is get to know some singles because it's really, single people are very easy to add to your group, right? And it's not a family of six, like it's one or two people. And so that was actually kind of, maybe we'll get to it later, but sort of a hospitality tip is just think about singles. And if you don't know any, get to know some because they really add a lot to your table and, they love coming. So we have a couple of single friends that join us most weeks. And then also internationals. It's another way to introduce them to what family life is like in the United States, that kind of thing. And, obviously to come around a Christian table, we have a number of that kind of come in that are in that category that come to our house and join us.
And what a wonderful blessing to be able to join a family when maybe their family's far off. They don't live nearby.
Yeah.
That's such a huge blessing.
So that's kind of every week. And then, if we can, like I say, when the weather's nice and we can add an extra family to that, that's a lot of times what we're doing. That feels manageable most weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. When you're having that many people into your home, how do you prepare for that logistically? We talked a little bit about, disposable pans that might help with cleanup later. Not that you have to do that, but that's an option. Do you have dishes and silverware for this many people? Do you, especially like when you're eating outside, do you use disposables? What are some of your hot tips for serving that many people?
Okay, so right now, for the children that we have, they're all 9 and younger. So we actually feed the children before all the adults sit down. So this is obviously going to change as the kids get older. But right now, it is an even. It's a split. There's adults and then there's small children. So we feed the children first. I do have a couple of just small tables that are, you get them at Costco. They, you put them up and put them down. They store really easy. They're lightweight. We put the kids and do the kids first. And then that actually allows the adults to sit down and enjoy the meal. Of course, there's lots of up and down. With that many children, there's still lots of up and down, but at least you kind of get them fed. So
most of your age range of grandchildren is baby to elementary.
9. Yeah, to 9 years old.
That's a lot of work for the parents.
Yeah. So
with 17 of them.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really fun. I mean, and you just expect it to be chaotic. I mean, just expect that. Like that's just part of it. For sure, I would say if you're using disposable silverware and plates and bowls is easier, do it. Just do what's easier. I don't do that. Partly because I have I have plastic stuff for the kids. It's actually relatively easy for me. I just pull that out, put it on the table. But but sometimes I'll do paper. I think that's just, do what's easy. I mean, if it makes it easier to do that, just do that. I do have a stack of plastic that I use when we're outside in the summer, just because I don't want the glass dishes going outside. But I just kind of put those away for the rest of the year. But I do serve on real plates just because, so our family doesn't do a Sabbath dinner altogether. And so this isn't a Sabbath dinner, but I do still want to make it feel like this is a meal where you've come and you ate with real plates and forks. Mm-hmm. But I would definitely use paper if it made it easier for me to do it. I mean, that's one of those things where I think just take that as a shortcut if that will make it possible. Mm-hmm. And if we get a really large crowd on it, sometimes I will use paper. So I like feeding the children first in the summertime, and when the weather's good, then the kids have to go outside and they'll say, "Oh, can we go downstairs?" No, you have to go outside. So they go outside and they have a great time playing. When it comes to winter and we're inside, we will usually put on a movie just because it's a lot of kids, and then that keeps them occupied. I also have a lot of dress up clothes, and people that really like dress up clothes. It's so interesting how little children like dress up clothes.
That's a great idea. They
easy.
love putting on costumes.
It's so mm-hmm. interesting too, how like kids just gravitate to dress up clothes.
Well, then it makes their play more realistic, because they're always playing imaginative play anyway. So then if they really can dress up, it's just so fabulous. So much fun. We had a costume crate when my kids were growing up, and it was so sad because as they grew up, it slowly kind of made its way up into the attic. And I remember later pulling it down and thinking, okay, I guess these should go in a garage sale.
Like, oh no.
It's kind of sad.
End of an era.
End of an era.
Yeah.
There's still one that I saved that I just could not get rid of. Actually, two. One day, a nephew or a grandchild, somebody will wear this.
We'll wear this.
Yes.
That's so great. Yeah. So that's fun too for kids that are not in our usual mix. Actually, that's the thing that I think when kids come to my house, that's what they like better than anything else is the dress ups. So we have that downstairs. So kids eat, and then they go downstairs or outside. And then, and then adults sit around the table. I can kind of get 14 at one table, like with a little extension. So if we have more than that, then I split into 2 tables. And if I ever have to split into 2 tables, I actually try to make the 2 tables even, just so that no one feels like they're at the side table. No one wants to be at like the other table, right?
There's 3 people there, and exactly. The other 12 are having a fabulous time next door. Yes.
Yeah. So those are just like the tricks. And then I do try to distribute people at the 2 tables. So, you got to know your people, but this is one of those things too, where if there's people coming that don't know everyone, like my daughter-in-laws they're the best. And they, a lot of times just kind of say, oh, this person's coming or that person's, and they're just great. Like if I'm busy in the kitchen still, doing the last minute stuff. I mean, I always try to greet everyone at the door, but then it's like, oh, but I've got that thing on the stove. And then my daughters-in-law are just all really wonderful about jumping in and introducing people if they haven't met anyone, doing that kind of thing.
Helping create conversation and keep conversation going and asking open-ended questions.
All the things,
all
right?
The things.
Yeah. Yeah. So just making people feel welcome. So that's actually a hot tip, right? Mm-hmm. Have your your stepsons marry really well. And then you get these wonderful people in your life that just help you practice hospitality.
Absolutely. That's fabulous.
Yeah. So I'm very grateful for them and, just their thoughtfulness. I mean, it's my house, but they're participating in the hospitality that's happening. So, with the meal and all of that. So, yeah.
Oh, what a fun thing. And when you divided the tables, are you thinking through putting people at different places every week, kind of mixing it up?
Not so much. And when it's just our family, people divide pretty well. And so it's more if there's people that are not usually with us that I'll try to think about that a little bit more.
Think about who they would have good conversation with.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Be comfortable sitting next to.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Going back to your dishes, do you have one full set or did you collect kind of over time a mix and match, or how did you do that?
So actually that's funny because I brought back these dishes when I lived in Cambodia. I was living in Cambodia right before we got married. And so I brought those dishes with me, and they're blue and white, and they're chunky and funny because they were made in the market in Cambodia. So that, they're a little bit mismatched and all of that. So, but I have those. And then over time, it's actually really easy to add blue and white just because it's just a popular color. And so, like I found a stack of 8 Corelle white plates. Oh, they're so great because the profile is super low. Corelle is really an interest. I never had them. And then I saw those, and it's like, you get 8 plates and like a 1-inch stack. It's like, oh, they're not even, I don't even have to find another place to put them, right? They'll fit on my shelf.
Thin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And they're white and they match the blue and white. So yeah, just kind of over time, that's kind of how I've added things.
And those are so inexpensive. You can find them at Walmart or probably lots of other retail stores. Yeah. But they're very inexpensive.
Really inexpensive. So yeah, so that was very helpful adding those in. And then, yeah, I do have enough silverware. I think I have enough for 20, which is kind of the number that's going to be the top number on any given Wednesday. So
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, silverware, you can find big boxes at Costco or Sam's Club. If you're a member, that's how I resupplied our stock. When we moved, it was such a hodgepodge. We didn't have a full set. We had bought 2 over the 20 years of our marriage. When I looked at it later, I'm like, I don't know where the disappearing silverware goes.
Where are the teaspoons?
Yes.
What I want to know is, where are all the teaspoons in the world?
I just feel like kids threw it in the trash when they were scraping their plate. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe if we used paper plates and real silverware, that just was too much for their little brains to compute. And so everything went in the trash. All I know is I had to do an emergency Costco run before we had anyone over. And it was very inexpensive. They happened to have a sale. So if you're watching it, sometimes they do at Sam's or Costco, they say a price like, I don't know, $60. And during 1 month, they'll subtract. When I went and bought each set, it was minus $20 off of each set. So
that was a great deal.
A seasonal sale or a monthly sale. So that's one way you can do it. I've also heard with people trying to collect dishes that they look at Goodwill or Salvation Army or things like that and do a mix and match, which is totally fine as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love your Corelle idea because they do stack so thin.
The
you don't have to have
thin.
a lot of cabinet space.
Yeah. And so that's especially for the extras, right? So I use like whatever, the 12 blue and white most of the time, but then I have those white ones to add in very easily. So
fabulous ideas. So how do you make your home feel warm and welcoming when people are coming over, especially people who aren't coming every week?
So I learned something from my mom that I never knew that I had learned. So my mom did a lot of hospitality, really spur of the moment. My mom was always ready to just invite someone in. She never apologized. So I said, we grew up on a farm. I have 6 siblings. So there was a lot of people in the house, and we had pets. We had dogs that were inside, outside. So our house wasn't fancy, and it was clean, but there was stuff. I mean, it was a house. It was lived in. Exactly. And my mom, I never, ever heard her apologize. And so I didn't realize this until probably, I don't know. I mean, it was well into my adult life that I realized her never apologizing wasn't, she didn't even think about it. She didn't think about apologizing because she's just saying, come in, just come in and be part of things here. Have a meal with us. Here's some fresh bread. My mom she always had fresh bread. Here's a piece of fresh bread. Sit down, just start talking. The apology always draws attention to the thing that you're like apologizing for.
And they never would have noticed most of the time.
No, people don't notice. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there are some people that notice, but I think most people don't notice.
Most people do not walk in ready to do a white glove treatment to underneath your couches and on top of your,
Refrigerator,
ceiling fans or refrigerator.
Right? Yeah. So I think, just like that action, so it's sort of a what not to do, like, but how to make it feel welcome. Like, oh, come in, welcome. We're so glad you're here,
Be comfortable in your own space.
Yeah. And people, over the years would always say to me, I just loved coming to your mom's house. Like people that I would meet people here and there and everywhere. And they'd be like, oh, is your mom Judy Roberts? Like, yes, that's my mom. I was at her house one time. I don't know what it was. I just loved being there. So anyway, I think that this is all part of this thing that like, just, make it comfortable. Like just welcome people. That's what we feel that way. If we go to someone else's and someone says, come in, make yourself at home, can I get you something to drink?
If you have a fresh slice of baked bread, that would be pretty amazing. That's actually something you can put in the freezer in case you do have unexpected guests. If you're making it all the time, that's even better, but you can bake bread and freeze it. You can even pre-slice it, pull that thing out, put it in the toaster, put some butter and honey on it, and do a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and they will have fabulous memories of coming to your house too.
When you said that butter and honey, like we had honey from our bees, and like this is what people would say. They'd be like, that your mom would have that bread and then she'd put that honey on it, like, and it's just like this whole experience that people had. And I thought, oh, I don't think that they were looking at the house like not being perfectly clean. I just don't think that was ever part of it. So,
well, when my kids were growing up, we had 5 teenagers all at once. And I remember just lots of friends being over. It was just always the hustle and bustle of life, daily life. And 5 children just lived there, very lived in house. And there would be times that I would say, we need to do this or that, repaint here, fix this little dent in the wall or this paint chip. And my husband would jokingly say, why? Why would we? We have 4 teenage boys. So on it went. And we did sometimes do some remodeling, but on and on it went. And one time we had one of their friends came over who was not a usual friend. And I don't know, maybe their house was pristine and gorgeous and perfect. But one of the comments they made to my kids was, wow, your house looks very lived in. And all of a sudden I saw the little paint chips and all the things. And I was like, I'm not sure that's a compliment. I'm not real sure if they mean it as a compliment, but I guess I kind of took it as a compliment.
I think it's a compliment. Take that as a compliment.
Because I realized, yes, there are things we need to do. It's always a process. Always. If you own your home, there's always something that needs to be done. And there were times that we would, repaint the kitchen cabinets or whatever. But at the same time, I realized, well, that's what a home is meant to be, is lived in. And so it is going to have dings and dents and where someone rode their ripstick through the living room when they weren't supposed to and banged into a wall, or the brothers were wrestling and someone's shoulder went into a wall, or, all the happenings, all the memories that make up what living was in a home with 5 teenagers.
Right. That's so great. I love it. Yeah. That harkens a little bit back to like living overseas and, being invited into people's very, very humble homes where, people live in really in utter poverty and they're just honored to have
dirt floor,
1 room,
no running water,
no running water. All the things, right? There's a little open fire in the middle of the floor. And I just think, oh, I live in a palace, right?
That's one good thing for Americans to remember. A lot of times we are maybe ashamed or nervous or feel like what we have to offer isn't good enough. Our home isn't as nice as it could be. We are living like kings and queens over in America compared to so much of the world. Even if our home is humble compared to American standards, we still have what most people in the world would be just honored to have.
Yeah.
And so it's good to remember how blessed we really are,
yeah,
and to not be ashamed of it, but to be thankful for what God has given us.
That's right.
it's okay to pursue something a little bit nicer or want to paint to make something look better or, whatever it is. It's okay to have some things you're working on, but always in the mindset of being grateful and thankful for what we have.
And not putting off hospitality for the sake of like, well, once it gets to that point, right, then I'll feel comfortable. It's just because it's a both and. It's that we have this now. And we also, we should absolutely want to beautify our surroundings, so to do that, but then also just say, oh, this is a wonderful place that God has given us. What can I do here? How can
This is what I have to offer, and I'm not going to apologize for it. Like you mentioned, the small kitchen. If you have a tiny kitchen, don't start commenting on that as soon as everybody walks in. Well, I'm so sorry I have a small kitchen. I mean, I'm just, I'm so sorry that everyone doesn't fit here. Why?
Right.
You have a small kitchen. Who cares?
It's great.
Most people in the world have really small kitchens. Speaking of, Smitten Kitchen, she does a blog and cookbooks and all that from a tiny New York apartment kitchen. And she pulls it off. It's it's kind of incredible.
Yeah.
I also remember hearing a story of some sort of ruler or dignitary coming to visit the U.S. from one of those very poor countries. And in his country, he was somebody. When they brought him over here, they put him up in some sort of home, mansion, sort of type place. And he just could not believe it. Was just mind-blowing, the technology we had, the size, the resources. And I remember seeing the home, and it wasn't even that.
Yeah.
It was fine, but it wasn't really what you would consider a huge mansion here in America. But he was just could not even overcome.
Yeah.
And normally you think of a ruler living in a palace. Well, no such thing over there for him.
For anyone. Yeah.
Or for anyone. People are very poor and still share their tea and cookies. What is your must-have kitchen item, and where can we find it?
I don't know if it's a must-have, but it's actually kind of a fun thing. It's a 5-blade kitchen shears. So they're for cutting herbs. So I'd seen them and I remember thinking, I wonder if I would ever use those. So I waited until I saw them at a secondhand store for like $1 and I bought them and I thought, we'll see if I like these or not, because I didn't want to spend not that they were expensive. They're probably like $10, but like, no, I'm going to spend my $1.
But still, you're like, okay, if I'm just going to give them to Goodwill, then I don't want to spend my $10.
Yeah, I don't want my $10. So anyway, I got them and I tried them and I really like them. So it's not really a must-have, but a lot of your guests share like real must-haves, like, a good knife, a good saucepan, like those things. So I thought I'll just say something else that's actually been really fun.
Well,
I really like them.
This is something you use all the time.
Yeah,
and we use herbs. We cut herbs for recipes every day.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really like them. They're really, really fun.
And if you don't have a sharp knife, I bet it can really cut herbs very quickly.
It does. So I did look, you can get them for like $10 on Amazon. So
and it's called
5-blade kitchen shears or kitchen scissors or kind of, if you looked up that, you'd find them. So I was surprised
and post it.
I was surprised how much I use them. Yeah, they're fun. So, and I like them because like sometimes with cilantro or with mint, I found that I don't have to get every leaf off the stem because they actually cut the stem really small. So like on cilantro, I'll cut off, the bottom part of it, but I don't painstakingly pull all of the leaves off of the stems on the upper stems, and you just cut them and it works. So it's pretty quick. There's my hot tip.
I love it. I like it so much. So do you have a fun story you want to share with us?
I have a story I was trying to think of a story. So I have a story about when I was kind of first learning how to like invite a lot of people over, and I did a meal and I didn't anticipate how long it was going to take to cook it. I had made the meal before, but for like 8, and then this was like, I was making it for 20. So I made enough, but I didn't anticipate how long it was going to take to cook. So it was like an hour and a half or something. Oh, no. And of course, like I'm anxious and nervous. So I like keep opening the oven and like, is it done? So it's like, I'm probably extending the cooking every time I do that.
The temperature's dropping every time you open the door.
Right. So I laugh about it because I just kept saying, oh, I'm really sorry the food's not done. Like trying to pull out other things like
chips and salsa, anyone?
Exactly.
Third round of chips and salsa.
Yeah, exactly. Another round, like, what should we serve dessert before dinner?
That's not a bad idea.
Anyway, I had a really cheerful crowd, and like we were all just laughing about it. So, but I think I like the story because it's like, things happen, and you just like whatever. Like if you just go with it.
You just have to.
Everybody will be fine, right? Nobody was offended.
You just have to, or your attitude ends up ruining the night.
It does. Like I was, and it could have, but thankfully, yeah.
It's just, it is what it is. It's going to be done when it's done.
Yeah.
So you really just have a choice how you're going to react to the whole situation.
I did learn, put things in several smaller pots, not this one big pot that's in the oven that's going to take forever to cook.
That makes sense. That's actually a really good tip as well. If you have a giant amount, you may have to add on to your cooking time.
Yeah. So,
or if your oven is too full, the heat doesn't circulate as well. Right. So you can't overload the oven.
Yeah.
You do have to learn how to make sure you have some airspace. Some of the newer ovens may not be that way. I've heard some really high-tech new ovens may circulate it just fine, but I'm thinking more of the ones that I grew up with.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of what I have in my kitchen.
You had to kind of rotate the pans from one rack to the other, or one rack may burn and the other. Oh, goodness. Figuring out ovens from back in the day was quite the scientific experiment.
For sure. That's where a roaster oven can help you too.
Roaster ovens, that's a great idea.
It really...
what do you use yours for?
Well, if I'm making, like if for example, if the quantity of meat's not going to fit in my crock pot, I've one of I think it's probably the largest crock pot that you can get. But, there's sometimes when it's like, oh, it's really not quite enough for the 30 adults that I'm going to try to feed. So I use a roaster oven for that, but also to keep things warm or, you can bake in it. You can bake in a roaster oven.
Yeah, they have a temperature on there, like 350, 400, you can set
your 9x13 in there. You can bake in those. So
you can put glass in there?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know this.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, it gives you like another oven.
Really?
And especially with something like a fruit crisp, right? It's not like a cake that has to bake, at this very specific temperature. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're really just warming it up is what you're doing.
Right.
And so
getting the top maybe crisp.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe you basically do it in there and you put it to crisp at the top, at the very end, stick it under the broiler or something. Yeah.
That is so interesting. I've had a roaster oven in the past, but I've used the insert that's already in there. But being able to just set something in there, because then you could just pull it out and serve from that really easily.
Yeah.
That is very interesting.
And then it's clean too.
Are they all the same size roaster ovens?
No, they're not.
What
they're
size do you
sizes.
have?
I just got myself a second one at a yard
tell
sale.
us about it.
So I haven't used it yet. I just got it. But I was like, oh, it's a little bit smaller than the one I have. I'm like, oh, I think that will be, useful. If you don't have shelf space, if you don't have place to store things, then it's a problem. But I have a good spot for it. So I thought
So you can just pick the size that you feel would work for you. Any particular brand you would recommend, or really anything?
I don't know. Just because the one, I think I have a rival. I think that's when I pictured the name on it. But I don't know that it's better or worse than any other. I'm sure that there's top of the line ones. Mine probably isn't that. It's probably just.
But it works.
Yeah,
just
but it works great. Yeah.
Another fabulous tip.
Yeah. And, the roaster oven, I always do my Thanksgiving turkey in my roaster oven because, you've got so many things right around Thanksgiving.
So many things compete for oven space at Thanksgiving.
Right. So the roaster oven, I've done a pork loin roast in the roaster oven. So yeah, I think if you're ever doing a crowd, a roaster oven is really, really handy.
And that has a keep warm setting as well, where you could keep your turkey warm.
Yeah, you can just keep it down. Yeah.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
And that would be cheaper than buying a hot box. We've talked about a hot box on here before, which would, if you do a lot of hospitality where you have a lot of dishes that need to stay a certain temperature, that can be an option, but it's more expensive and you have to have a place to store it and all of that. But a
roaster oven is pretty small profile.
Warm.
Yeah.
Great tips. Did you have anything else to add that I've forgotten?
I'm sorry, just because I wrote down one cleaning tip, something that is, and I'm sure many people know this, but boiling water for wine or fruit stains. It's the most amazing thing for a wine stain on a tablecloth.
So you take your tablecloth, put it over the sink and pour boiling water.
Just boil the water in your kettle, pour the boiling water over it. It's magic.
And for wine or
fruit. So like berries and things like that. It's unbelievable. It's so fun.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
And it just disappears.
It disappears.
How did I not know this?
I don't know. I was probably...
I always treat them and wash them, but the boiling water
and if you do it right away,
amazing.
If you do it right away, you don't have to treat it. You just pour the boiling water over it.
And you can watch the stain disappear.
You watch it disappear. It's like magic.
That is magic.
So I do think that was probably one of those times.
I want to go spill wine now and just try it.
I was probably on Facebook looking at life hacks or something. That, like it is, it's like, I shouldn't be looking. Then I saw that. I was like, see, this is why
I have to try this.
Why this is great for me once in a while to look at the, those household tips you can get. Yeah.
And then if one really stands out to you, try it.
Yeah. This is when
you know whether it's okay, is this real or not real? But it could be so amazing.
So amazing.
That it's something you want to share with the world.
I want to share this with you all.
That is fabulous.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah, so I hope everyone will try it. Because who doesn't get a red wine stain on their tablecloth?
Mm-hmm. I've heard hydrogen peroxide for blood. Not that hopefully no one is bleeding at your table. But
cut themselves with your sharp knife.
Exactly. But supposedly if you and I've done it before, I just don't remember if it's quite as magical as you're saying with the boiling water. But I remember it working where there was blood on something and you pour hydrogen peroxide on it and it bubbles and it just disappears. I think.
Yeah.
So that's a hot tip to try as well. Hopefully that's not one you'll have to use, but there's always the person that might come in with a child needing a Band-Aid or something and dripping blood.
That's right. The bloody nose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You might need the hydrogen peroxide tip, and it is cheap to buy a big bottle of hydrogen peroxide, and they have spray bottles now.
Spray bottles of hydrogen peroxide. I love it. It's perfect.
Spray all the blood stains. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been so much fun, and I have just enjoyed hearing all of your fabulous tips. There are so many things that I'm going to implement in my hospitality, and I'm sure my listeners feel the same way. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's really been fun.
Until next time, bye for now.